Hi, my name is Thomas Yates, and I'm doing my presentation on doing business in France. Let's start with some facts and statistics about France. About 31.77% of their GDP is through the exports of goods and services. About 32.75% of that GDP is actually through imports of goods and services. Their top export country is Germany, followed by the United States. And then their top import country is actually also Germany, but followed by China. They have the world's fifth largest economy with a GDP of approximately $2.8 trillion as of 2018. And in total, there are more than about 28,000 foreign-owned companies doing business in France. We can move on to their language and culture. The national language of France is, of course, French. They do speak other languages there, such as English and German and a number of others, but those are mostly learned either in school or they are learned because they are necessary for business. Again, their national language, of course, is French. Their major religions are Roman Catholic, Protestant, Jewish, and Muslim. And the breakdown of that is about 83 to 88% identify as Roman Catholic. There are about 23 to 28% who identify as no religion. So mainly atheists, maybe some agnostics. About 5 to 10% identify as Muslim, 2% Protestant, and 1% Jewish. They very much value the freedom of religion. It is a very important concept in French culture, and it's guaranteed by the 1789 Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. Another very important concept in France, they value diversity. Le métissage culturel is their idea of cultural blending. You can think of that being similar to the American idea of the melting pot, everybody coming together to be one American culture, le métissage culturel, everybody coming together to be one French culture. And then laïcité is another very important concept in France. It is their constitutional principle of secularism. So basically, it relies on the division of their private life, which they believe is where religion belongs, and the public sphere, where you are meant to be a citizen, not your individual person, basically. Some social etiquettes in France. Greetings vary between genders and region. So men will typically just shake hands, while women will typically greet with light kisses or bis on the cheek. The number of kisses varies depending on the region of France. For example, in Nantes, you greet with 4 kisses, alternating cheeks. Whereas in the south of France, it's just 2 kisses. A lot of times foreigners have a hard time determining which side to kiss first, in which case the best word of advice is to just take the lead of the French person. A firm and confident handshake with eye contact is extremely important. The French very much value eye contact. Not looking somebody in the eyes when you're talking to them is considered very rude, especially if you're doing some kind of a formal meeting, business transaction of some sort. Eye contact is very necessary. The French people are usually very direct, but also in a diplomatic way. They will tell you the truth, but it's often in a very polite manner, which is interesting to me for sure. I do appreciate that. Another interesting fact is that it's frowned upon not to greet every individual in a group, no matter how large the group is. A simple, hey, everybody, isn't good enough. You are expected to either shake hands or give these bis to each individual in the group. Or you're lazy and you're not being respectful. Discussing one's wealth is also seen as taboo. Something that I also thought was interesting is that they are very close. An arm's length distance or even a bit closer is typically an appropriate amount of personal space in France. And you'll often see people put a hand on you, put a hand on a shoulder or something like that as a sign of affection. Some customs and protocols in France. Arriving on time for dinner is very important. You are expected to be on time, and if you're not going to be on time, if you're going to be more than 10 minutes late, you are expected to call ahead of time and have a valid excuse. Rather than waiting for everybody to arrive, you wait until you are invited to eat. So bon appétit, enjoy your food. And you're supposed to know the customary positions of your silverware during the meal. So knowing what having your knife and fork crossed across your plate means, for example. First impressions are largely affected by appearance. So if you don't look if you're not dressed properly, if you are not holding yourself properly, that's going to have an effect on how you're viewed by a French person. And the French people use many gestures, and it's important to understand what those gestures mean. For example, loosely grabbing your throat with one hand, that means unbelievable, or yeah, right. The boff, or Gaelic shrug, is done by raising your shoulders, holding your hands palm out, and raising your eyebrows. So like this, you know. It means I don't know, or it's not my fault. And then tapping the side of your nose with your index finger, that usually means that one is clever or smart. So those are just a few of the different gestures that are pretty common in France. Now, moving on to business specific culture, there are high levels of formality. It's very important to keep your personal and professional lives separate. Again, back to that idea of laïcité, division of private life and public sphere. Excuse me. Appointments are typically made at least 2 weeks in advance through a secretary or assistant, in writing, over the phone, etc. Punctuality is extremely important, just like at dinner. If you're going to be late, if you're going to be more than 10 minutes late, you're expected to call and have a valid reason. Attention to detail is vital. They really appreciate that. And business is conducted on a hierarchical basis. So they do have a very clear hierarchy, and that is how things are managed and decided. Some of the business etiquette. Titles are very important. So monsieur, madame, mademoiselle, you are always supposed to address somebody with their title. And you're not supposed to use their first name until you're invited to do so. Sometimes in America, we are a little more lenient there, but in France, that is not considered acceptable. Translating a business card into French, translating a business card into the French language is not vital, but it is appreciated and it is seen as attentive, which, as we said on the last slide, attention to detail is very much valued in France. So that can only be helpful, and that can only improve your impression on French business professionals. Another thing, gifts typically are not exchanged at initial business meetings like they might be in some cultures. However, if you're invited over for dinner or a drink, you are always expected to bring the host a gift, either a bottle of high quality wine or a dessert. And gifts tend to be opened when received. In America, sometimes we kind of gather the gifts, we hold them off, we put them to the side, and we wait till the end. And that's kind of how we end everything. But in France, when you receive a gift, that's typically when you would open it. So some meeting-specific protocols and negotiation techniques in France. They're structured, but they're not overly formal. It's one thing that I learned is that it's best to be told where to sit, best to wait until then. Again, while it's not overly formal, there is a structure and there may be a specific place that specific people are required to sit. So just wait until you're told or directed. The French people tend to take their time when negotiating, asking lots of questions. It is very rare for any decisions to be made at a meeting. The main purpose of the meeting is to discuss. So they're going to come up with questions. They're going to ask you questions. They're going to take their time getting to know as much as they can. And then the decisions can be made from the top down. So the information from the meeting is then taken to the higher ups, who then take the time to deliberate and then make their decisions. And that is when, again, the decisions are made, not in the meeting, but afterwards. The meetings are just for discussion and just to get answers. When we're talking about negotiating specifically, the French do not like these hard sell tactics. As I said, the meetings are not when we're making decisions. That is to be made, those decisions are to be made later on after the information is gathered. So a lot of times in America, we use these hard sell tactics in meetings because we think the meetings are when we're closing the deal. It is suggested not to do that in France. The hard sell tactics are actually going to be frowned upon and are likely going to lose you the deal if you're doing that with a French business professional. If we move on to their political and legal environment, France is a republic. Their president is Emmanuel Macron. The president is elected by an absolute majority through a 2-round system. And then their prime minister is Jean Castex. And the prime minister is always appointed by the president. So Jean Castex was appointed by Emmanuel Macron. Their constitution was adopted in 1958. They have an independent judiciary system, so they do have, similar to our Supreme Court, a panel of judges which are appointed by the government, but they also have a judiciary system that is completely independent of all political parties as well. They have a two houses, National Assembly and the Senate. The National Assembly has 577 members, which are elected by an absolute majority in a single member constituency. And then the Senate has 348 members, and they are indirectly elected by an electoral college, similar to how we vote for president here in the United States. And then that is a picture rather of President Emmanuel Macron. Now, going on to the economic, social, and technological situation in France, it's the most visited country in the world. They have the third largest income in the world from tourism alone. However, they have an unemployment rate of about 8.338%. It is lower than about 30% of all other countries. They are members of the G7, the European Union, and the World Trade Organization. They've got a pretty highly educated population. They've got some pretty high quality universities, and they've got a very talented workforce, which all helps them to be known for their world-class infrastructure. Another interesting, to me, fact is that the Paris metropolitan region supports the largest concentration of technology engineers outside of the Silicon Valley here in the US. Some of their main industries are machinery, chemicals, automobiles, and metallurgy. And just so you know, metallurgy is the art and science of extracting metals from their ores and then modifying the metals for their use. Some really cool companies are Orange SA, which was previously France Telecom. Some of the ways that they have adapted to working internationally is they've developed a promotion adaptation strategy that they call Once But Many. And the company uses this strategy to quickly customize existing products for different markets, which helps reduce development costs and speed up the introduction of new products, which I thought was really interesting. Another notable company, which I think everybody is aware of at least, is L'Oreal. L'Oreal, shampoos, beauty products. And one way that they have worked to do business internationally is that they've had some growing local global tensions in the past, but they've managed them by deploying professionals with multicultural backgrounds in new product development. And new product development is the company's most critical source for their competitive advantage. Excuse me. So these multicultural executives have come to play a pretty critical role in product development, not just in Paris, where they started, where their headquarters is, but all over the world. So New York, Tokyo, Mumbai, Rio, all over the world, they've become to play a pretty important part. They've internationalized the management team rather than the structure of the company, which is really interesting. And what they've done is they've recruited and built teams around individual managers with experience in the norms and behaviors of multiple cultures. That way, these groups can work in multiple cultures and switch between these cultures seamlessly and pretty easily, which I think is pretty cool. Another big thing I think is cool is that they're working on some nuclear energy. So that's what that picture there is. I just thought that was really cool. That's a nuclear power plant picture. Some other facts about France is that the US is the largest foreign investor in France in terms of job creations. The US and France first established diplomatic relations in 1778, and our first trade agreement was with France, signed in 1778, and that was called the Treaty of Amity and Commerce. It is home to 29 of the world's 500 largest companies. There are about 4,600 US companies in France, which employ over 480,000 French citizens. And this is an interesting thought that I found online that I really thought was unique, or not unique, but really made me think, is that 40% of marriages in France end in divorce. But that has led to more women in the workforce in the last 50 years, which I thought was a very interesting thought. Excuse me. So that is Doing Business in France. Here are my citations. Thank you very much for tuning in, and I hope you have a good one.